Welcome, everyone. My name is Corey. I'm the Public Programs Coordinator here at the NHA, and I'm very excited to welcome you to this week's Food for Thought featuring Caitlin Marcoux, resident yogi. We thank you, as always, for supporting this free weekly program that is made possible in part by the MS Worthington Foundation and receives media support from Novation Media. Before we get started, it would be great if you could all take a minute to silence or turn off your cell phone so as not to disrupt the presentation. And while you're doing that, I wanted to remind everybody we had a little bit of change in schedule, and next week's lecture will be featuring Barbara White talking about Cyrus Peirce rather than Mike Harrison, who spoke last week. So if you want more information about that talk, there's flyers, they're in the lobby, they're up here, just feel free to ask. So, I could tell you a little bit more about our speaker today. Caitlin is a yoga teacher, mother, writer, healer, and breast cancer survivor. She is nationally certified in massage therapy and has been studying yoga for 16 years and teaching it for the last 6. A former modern dancer, she fuses her passion for music and dance with yoga, keeping her flow creative, playful, and fresh. Caitlin has written many pieces focusing on yoga and surviving breast cancer for Elephant Journal and Rebel Society, and blogs about her practice on and off the mat. She leads workshops, masterclasses, and retreats all over. But she lives right here year-round on Nantucket with her son Griffin, her partner Burr, and her dog Bodhi. Am I saying that right? Where her primary objective is to play outside with the people she loves as much as possible. She's an avid road cyclist, a stand-up paddle racer, and lover of all things water. Please join me in welcoming Caitlin Marcoux.
Okay, thank you guys for coming. I think I'm going to put on just a little bit more clothing, if you don't mind. I think some of you saw me practicing before, so that was my intention, was that you would walk in and get a little taste of what I do. I've been practicing for a long time now, so there's this common misconception on Nantucket that you have to be able to do what I do already to come to my classes. So I try to tell people that that's not necessarily the truth. At least I have a classroom of one student. So anyway, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about yoga. And I know that the title of this class was Tips for Staying Active or Keeping Active. And I don't know that I have that many different kinds of tips, but I think the one prevailing message that I would like to pass along is that yoga is a practice you can do at any age, you can start at any age, and you can do it everywhere. So as you can see, my mat, which is probably no bigger than 3.5 feet by 6, I can take with me anywhere. So you don't need a weight room, you don't need Nautilus equipment, you don't need a track, you don't need a bicycle. All you really need is you and some dedication. Of course, it's always nice to have a guide in the beginning. So, what is yoga? This is a huge question, and I could probably talk about it for hours. There's a lot of debate exactly about what yoga is, and so I'm not going to give you a very long, drawn-out history. We'll debate amongst ourselves within the community when yoga really started, but we like to say that it's between 3,000 and 4,000 years old. There's also a lot of debate about whether or not yoga is a religion, and it does come from the Hindu spiritual discipline, but you do not have to be a believer in any higher power other than the teacher within in order to practice yoga. So we like to think of it in terms of its physical discipline in this country, because I think we have a penchant for intensity here. There's a lot of A-types in our country, and we get very excited about showing off our physical prowess or our mental prowess, and we kind of gravitated to just the physical side of yoga. But that's not all that yoga is. Yoga is a whole set of different ideas around quieting the mind through meditation, using your breath work, we call it pranayama, to stay present in this particular time in your life, no matter what the circumstances are, whether they are lovely and happy and blissful, or challenging and tough, or depressing, shocking. Personally, it has become one of my favorite go-to coping mechanisms for times of strife, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. But lots of different aspects to the yoga, and I will just kind of, I'm not going to go into super big depths on this slide, but yoga is not only the physical practice, it's also the yamas and the niyamas, and I don't know if you can see, the breakdown is not really that important, but there are these concepts, these ideas. I'm so sorry, I'm getting over this horrible cold that everybody has had. These ideas that we want to live a life that is clean, that is pure, that is honest, that is thoughtful, that is meaningful, and to share our sense of love and compassion with all the people around us. So the yamas and the niyamas are an aspect of the practice. They're ethical guidelines, very similar to be kind to others, and a lot of these, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, these practices of honest living. So you find that in yoga as well. And then asana, which is number 3, is the physical practice, which is what you saw me doing right here. And in the United States, that's pretty much what most people recognize as yoga. Pranayama, which is number 4, is the breath work. We do a lot of really interesting kind of strange, we'll call it esoteric, different kinds of breath work, alternate nostril breathing, measuring your inhales and your exhales, holding breath, breath retention, these different kinds of things. And the idea is that if you can gain control over your breath when you're at rest, then when you need control over your breath, say cycling or in a stand-up paddle race, you will have it, it'll be there ready for you. And then there's a few other more interesting concepts about withdrawal of the senses and meditation as a practice of concentration, and this idea that if you practice all of these other 7 things, eventually you get to 8, which is samadhi, which is transcendence or bliss, or this idea of evolving to the place of ultimate knowledge. And that really is the actual goal of yoga, is ultimate knowledge. But in that I mean like knowledge of self. So if you really know yourself, you start to realize that you are not that different from all of those around you. So when people come to yoga, you don't want to blast them with all this kind of esoteric philosophy. You want to give them some things that they can take home with them. So like some simple forward folds, ways that they can loosen up their hamstrings, maybe ways that they can get that yogic six-pack abs, things like that. But the hope is that they'll stay for more. The hope is that they'll come back to class because of a deeper sense of peace that they feel when they leave. This goes into a little bit more detail about the yamas. I'll just go over them briefly. Ahimsa, which is the one that I talk the most about with my younger students, is Sanskrit for nonviolence. So this is this idea that not only are we kind to each other, but it really starts with ourselves. So we're kind to ourselves. This could mean knowing when to take a day off if you're feeling too stressed out. Knowing when to take a vacation, knowing when to give yourself a timeout when you might be arguing with your children. And then, of course, beyond and above that is being of service to others. Satya is Sanskrit for truth. So this idea that we always speak the truth. You're supposed to speak the truth in conjunction with ahimsa. So you're not constantly telling people that sort of inner monologue of what you might be thinking when you meet someone and they're wearing a dress that you think is profoundly inappropriate. You do not speak this because that would not be compassionate, that would not be ahimsa. But you want to show up for everyone in your life in the very same way, so that if you walked into a room with everyone that was important to you, they would recognize you as the same person. Do you know what I mean? So you don't behave one way with your partner and then behave another way with that sister you don't get along with. You're the same person all the time. And beyond that, this idea that we don't want to speak ill of each other, really, we want to be able to always say what we feel, but with kindness. And then asteya is a great one. It means non-stealing. So we don't steal each other's ideas. We don't take credit for things that aren't ours. Physically, you wouldn't steal something from someone else. Those are kind of obvious, but brahmacharya is one that you'll hear a lot about in the media when it comes to more tantric practices. Its direct translation is abstinence. So there have been a lot of contemporary articles about how the practice of brahmacharya applies to just one's romantic life. And I don't think in this modern culture that the yogic forefathers really meant that you weren't supposed to love each other up. But I think that they wanted you to consider who you were loving and to be very thoughtful about that choice, how to spend your energy with other people, and have it be meaningful. So when I talk to some of my older teenage girls, we might talk about brahmacharya in terms of how to make wise decisions in terms of who they spend their time with, and to know that being physical with someone else is a privilege and a gift and something very, very sacred. So that's sort of the way we might discuss abstinence. And then finally, aparigraha is this idea of non-hoarding. So what do you really need to live? Do you really need the new iPhone? Or can you be okay with the iPhone 4? So in yoga we talk a lot about being santosha, which is Sanskrit for contentment, being okay with what you have and not coveting things that aren't flowing freely through your life. So as you can see already, this is a lot more than just getting your foot behind your head, although that's fun too. BKS Iyengar, who recently passed, is one of the fathers of the modern yoga movement, and he said, "It is through the alignment of the body that I discover the alignment of my mind, myself, and my intelligence." So sometimes the asana, the physical practice, is the gateway to having a deeper conversation with who you are. If you can fine-tune your physical alignment, if you can open up the lines of energy in the body, the idea is that you can have a better awareness of yourself, not only in time and space, but how you carry yourself when you present yourself to other people, how you physically interact with those that are important to you in your life. So this is my son, Griffin. I think he was 3 months old in this picture. I really believe that you can practice yoga at any stage in your life, and so I love teaching the little ones. And they make it really challenging and really fun. But when you start them this young, it seems to open up a world that is more clear in its messages because they have a better sense of clarity around themselves, if that makes sense. This is Tao Porchon Lynch. She is the world's oldest living yoga teacher. She just turned 96. I don't know if you can tell, but she is balancing on her hands. Her seat is not on the grass, so she is doing a floating full lotus. She's absolutely amazing. She was here at the Nantucket Yoga Festival this past summer, and I had the honor of taking some classes with her. She's just incredible. This is her, again, this is called lotus pose. I can't do this pose. She's 96, and she can do it. So all that stuff about bone density, and I don't know if I can do this stuff because my bones are brittle. Forget it. You don't get to have that excuse. These are my strong girls. So about 4 years ago, I started teaching yoga to just the young women of Nantucket. And it was certainly not to exclude the boys, but it was to exclude the boys. Because there's something wonderful that happens in a room full of just girls or just women, but specifically just girls, because they really, girls today have so many external pressures and influences coming at them from every direction. And in a room which is sacred and safe, such as the yoga studio that I teach at, they really have a chance to express their fears and anxieties. And then when you invite them to sort of creatively express those fears and anxieties through their bodies, something really incredible happens. The fear, the anxiety, the shame, or the doubt of self moves through the body, and it just, I don't know, it just falls down on the floor. It leaves their body on the mat, and they They grow tall, they smile wide, they feel really good about themselves. They see in each other that they share some of the same fears. So we can talk it out, and then we can laugh it out and dance it out. And it's been a really amazing privilege. This is the video, so how do I change the audio? Oh, so I just get to hit play. Okay, great. So this is just a little example of some of the things that we do. They have to learn to trust each other and to support each other. And hopefully we're sowing these seeds so that they can continue to support and help each other for the rest of their lives. So here are some close-ups of some of my favorite students. And as you can see, at this point, they have no fear. They're ready to go upside down. They're ready to rely on each other for help, for assistance. They're great. So that leads me to this concept of being able to do yoga anywhere. And I really wanted to put my money where my mouth was this year and do yoga on stand-up paddleboards. So Nantucket Sup Yoga, stand-up paddle yoga, was born out of this idea that you could do yoga and nothing would hold you back, not even the tide. So I launched a new business and took a major risk and bought 6 stand-up paddleboards and 6 anchors and 6 paddles, and started taking groups of locals and visitors alike out into the harbor this summer and taught them how to do yoga on stand-up paddleboards. And it was a blast because you can't take yourself so seriously when you lose your balance and you fall into the water and all of a sudden you're soaking wet. And it introduces a sense of playfulness and youthfulness to the practice. So I can't say enough good things about that. And I think that everyone in this room should try it at some point, not necessarily with me, but just to try it. It's the most calming, soothing, serene place, unless it's blowing, in which case we don't go out. And I learned that the hard way. I don't take people out if it's going over 13 miles an hour. But to lie down at the end of a yoga practice on the board and let your hands fall into the water and feel the water kiss your fingers, or every once in a while a little fish will come up and nibble your toe. You're so connected to the world around you, and you really do have this sense of all things as one, which is so strongly delivered to you by Mother Nature. And what a beautiful place we live in. Gosh, we're so privileged to be here on Nantucket and to be surrounded by water. Water is so healing. And it was such a treat for me to be out on our harbor every day this summer, taking groups out. And you see the joy in their faces. And you don't have to be going up into headstand or doing full splits to have a good time doing this practice. It's just really fun. And I love this quote. I fully believe in it. The bottom right-hand picture is of me on a board in a pool. And the reason I wanted to show this was because this summer I had the privilege to work with a student, who had had a spinal cord injury that left her paralyzed for a short amount of time, and then she very slowly started to incrementally get different movement back into her body. So when I met her, she was still using a cane and was walking like this, very stiff, and could not make it from a standing position to sitting down without the help of her daughter or several different stages of stools, handrails. She couldn't walk down the stairs. I started talking to her about stand-up paddle yoga as just I think it was just idle chit-chat. I was letting her know that it was something else that I was doing. And she said that will be my goal by the end of the summer. I want to get out on one of those boards. I want to do some yoga with you on one of those boards. Well, I met with her several times a week for the whole summer. And by August, we were ready. So I got on the board with her tandem and we paddled out and we put an anchor down in the water. And there was a lot that she couldn't do, but there were many things that she could do. And so we just came up with these different modifications for her, and I taught a full class with all these other people. And for her, I would give her special instructions. She fell so in love with this practice that she bought a stand-up paddleboard, and she decided that she didn't want to deal with the current and the tides and all of that stuff, but could we put it in her pool? So this is her pool out in Cisco, and I was showing her a few different things. And I had never done yoga in a pool before, certainly not on a stand-up paddleboard in a pool. And it was a blast. She had really wanted to do this particular pose. And in September, she stood up for the very first time without my help and was balancing just like that on the board. So I really think that anything is possible if you put your mind to it, and yoga really can help us get there. Which brings me to this story. In March of 2013, I got diagnosed with a really aggressive form of breast cancer. And I had found the tumor in my breast myself 2 years earlier. But because I had just recently finished up breastfeeding my son, doctors kept telling me that it was just mastitis. It was just, they said it was just an infection in my milk ducts. And I said, really? And they said, yeah, you're way too young. At the time I was 34. You're way too young to have breast cancer. You have no family history. It's not it. Okay. So we'll do a mammogram, right? Because mammography is what saves everybody. It's, that's the go-to screening tool. So the mammography comes back negative, you're fine. The mammography came back negative, but they said that there was some calcifications and that I had dense breast tissue, but that it was a no big deal thing, so that we were just gonna keep re-mammogramming every 6 months. So I had lost a husband to lung cancer several years earlier, and my father had been diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer, and he's fine. But I didn't want to think that I had cancer. I had already had enough cancer in my life. So I kind of put the blinders on, even though the yoga practice really teaches you to have this strong connection with yourself. So you hone your intuition like a fine crafted tool. And there was this part of me that was like, no, this is really off. But again, denial is strong. And I had had enough. So I was just ready to say, okay, fine, you're right, I don't have cancer. Well, 2 years later, the tumor had grown, and I had blood pouring out of my nipple. And I called up the friends of mine at Mass General Hospital, and I told them that, and they said, well, we're going to put you on a 10-day course of Augmentum. It's likely nothing. It's still just a breast infection. And I said, okay, well, if you don't mind, I'm going to go to the Nantucket Cottage Hospital, and I'm going to ask them to do another mammogram. And later that day, they asked me to come back for a needle biopsy. And long story, not too much shorter, but it turned out that I had not stage 3, but grade 3 tumor blasting through my entire right breast. And then we were having conversations about how they were going to do everything they could to save my life. And I was really angry, right, because I felt so wronged in the beginning. I was so ready to, I wanted to blame somebody, and the prevailing emotion in my body was anger. So what do you do with that, right? Because anger and negativity breed cancer, and I already had cancer, so what I really needed to do was put the kibosh on that and slow that down. So I turned to my yoga practice, because that is the tool that I have spent my life crafting. And so it was time to really put it to the test. And the only times that I could keep myself from projecting into the future that could involve death and leaving my then 3-year-old without a mother, was when I was practicing, and I could rely on the grounding sense of staying present in the moment. And so the interesting thing for me about fear, if you think about this, is that it really only exists as a projection of the future, right? So you all probably have different fears living within your body right now, but in this particular moment, there's no burning building. Uh, None of you, as far as I know, are having a cardiac arrest. Everybody's okay, right? But when we start thinking about what could happen to us in the future, that's when things start to spiral out of control. So yoga helps us come back to the present moment. I decided that before every chemo infusion, I would do a yoga pose hooked up to the IV or on the chemo chair, sometimes in the hallway of the cancer wards. And I did a lot of them here in Nantucket, and I did a bunch of infusions in Boston. And it got to be that the other patients would see me and they would start giggling and laughing, and the nurses would come by and like, that's that crazy breast cancer patient. She's doing yoga again in the hallway. And there was this one fabulous time that I was doing some sort of handstand out in the hallway at Mass General, and I heard this woman who, like me, she had no hair. Her doctor came in to get her, and she said, I want the chemo that woman's having. And it was just a great way of lightening the mood, right? Because cancer can seem pretty depressing. So it's fun to get other people to inspire them to smile even in the face of adversity. So we would take a photograph, we called them chemo asanas, before every treatment. And the big one up there is right outside the hospital here with a bunch of my different yoga students and friends, and we were celebrating the fact that I had had my 13th round of Taxol, which was, for me, probably the hardest and would make me extremely sick every time I would get it. So this was like, yay, last one. And this is my little family. And it's been great to have them both, my partner and my son, practicing yoga with me over the years. And Griffin has gotten to the point where, that's my son, he's gotten to the point where he expects that people do yoga in hospitals, which I think is hysterical. So every time we go now for him to get a vaccine or a checkup or whatever, he's, look at me, Mom, and doing downward facing dog in the middle of the hallway. So I thought it was pretty sweet to be able to pass that along to him, because hopefully it'll be a practice that sticks with him for the rest of his life. In closing out my little slide presentation, I just wanted to throw this one up, because Jack Kerouac's a pretty cool guy, and this is really sums it up. So I could give you a very long, digressive speech about what is yoga. This is what it is. The message is to be in love with your life. Yoga teaches you to be present and to embrace every aspect of your life as a gift, as an opportunity for growth, and as an opportunity to fall deeper and deeper in love. And that is really the message I would like you to take away. If I could demystify or distill it down to its very core essence, yoga is love. And then I wanted to leave a certain amount of time for you to ask any questions, because we could go in a million different directions here. So, is anybody curious about anything in particular? Please ask me a question. Yes.
I'm curious about how you first started yoga.
How I first started practicing yoga? Yeah, sure. So very popular story. Athletics or dance equals injury in many cases, and it did for me. I dislocated my patella when I was pursuing a career in professional modern dance, and had to have 4 or 5 different knee operations. And I can't do anything with a lot of impact on my body now, but I needed a way of expressing myself physically, because that's what I knew my whole life. I started dancing here with Giovanna when I was 4 years old. And I went to Bard College to pursue a degree in choreography, and then I moved to New York City to start a dance company. And I did all those things, but then I hurt myself really badly. And I wandered into a very strange, very sort of hippy-dippy underground yoga studio in Brooklyn one day, and it was very intimidating, and everybody was wearing white. Turned out they were all Kundalini yogis, and Kundalini yogis are great, but at the time I was like, oh my God, everybody's drinking the Kool-Aid here. What is going on? And it, it reeked of incense, and there was wall-to-wall pink shag carpeting, which I couldn't really figure out how that was going to work with yoga mats. But anyway, I thought it was very strange, but I got to move my body, and it didn't hurt. And there was some chanting and some weird breath work going on, and I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to do that, but I'll do this physical stuff. And I kept going back, and soon I realized that I was sitting there with my eyes closed, chanting Om. And then I realized that I was doing the weird breath work. And then I realized that I was buying into all the other principles and the ideas that went along with it. And it went from being just a way of doing some exercise to more of a lifestyle choice. And through practicing yoga so consistently now, I never have knee pain. It's been, I don't know, it's like, it's miraculous. It almost makes me want to go back to dancing again. But it's a way that you can heal yourself. And I don't think that that's necessarily physiological. I feel like it's a lot more spiritual and emotional. And when there are injuries, we create a lot of drama and stories around them. And I think that we hold on to that. And yoga helps you clear it. So now I ride 20 miles on my bike almost every morning, and I have no knee pain, thanks to yoga. Yeah, anything else? Yay.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you tell us just very briefly little descriptions of the different types of yoga or that we might find on Nantucket?
Oh,
so if we're
yes.
looking for a class, what might differentiate one from the other?
Very smart question. So there are so many different types of yoga. Again, that would be a very big, very lengthy conversation. But in terms of the things that you can find here on Nantucket, at the yoga room where I manage and teach, we basically teach vinyasa yoga. Vinyasa means movement linked with breath. So a lot of what you saw me doing here in the beginning of my talk was vinyasa yoga. So in essence, as you inhale and you bring your arms up over your head, you're connecting your breath with your body, and then you exhale and you dive forward. So every movement has a connection to either be filling up and starting anew, or releasing and letting go. And there are some vinyasa classes that are a little bit more vigorous than others. So if you were to look at the schedule there, some say slow flow, some are dynamic. I teach a fairly athletic, dynamic class, so people frequently leave soaking wet. But this is not true for all the yoga there. Paul Bruno is one of our most beloved teachers, and he teaches probably the antithesis of what I do, which is called Yin Yoga. And this is really accessible for a wide variety of ages and abilities. Especially for people who have injuries, the Yin is really nice and soothing. So these are longer poses, and you would hold them for 5 to 7 minutes. You might start with a straddle, forward fold. Over time, when you get more flexible, you can take your straddle a little bit deeper, and he'll have you stay here for 5 to 7 minutes. And the interesting thing about it is at some point you're going to want to break the pose, right? It's like your groins start screaming. You're not necessarily screaming. I don't want to make it sound dramatic, but mentally you'll want to shift, and you don't always get to do that in life, right? Like sometimes you're stuck in a job that you don't necessarily love, but you have to stay in it for a little bit longer because maybe you're the sole breadwinner in your family. So what happens when you have to stay in an uncomfortable place for a certain duration of time? And if you can practice that on the mat, then you can practice it in other areas of your life. So that is part of the Yin practice. And then my sister Ariel, she teaches a kind of yoga that she has started to call heavy metal yoga. And I think that combines some weightlifting and some yoga moves. I also hear that she plays some rock and roll music. So that's appealing to some people. And yin more to others, and more athletic yoga seems to attract more A-type personalities. So it starts you, I think you gravitate towards maybe what you're set up for constitutionally, and then the world kind of opens up and you might become more interested in trying things that might not necessarily resonate with you right out of the gate. So there are a number of clubs now here that offer yoga. I know the Health Club does, I know the Westmore does, and the Great Harbor Yacht Club has yoga as well. There's so many different kinds now. And of course, the Yoga Festival, which Joanne Burnham puts on every summer, is a great way to go and sample, because she'll bring a plethora of different types of teachers to the island, so you can kind of, it's like a yoga smorgasbord. So you can go and sample different kinds. I did want to sort of show you how a pose might progress from easy to more challenging. So can we do that? Is that okay? I'm going to take this off though, because it's going to be hard for me to do both. All right. So let's say that you have some knee sensitivities and you would like to do a lunge, but maybe you don't have enough strength to stand all the way upright the way I was doing on the Standup album. So in the beginning of a Kneedown Lunge, you might start with you could take your yoga mat and fold it in half underneath the sensitive knee, or put a piece of clothing there, or a blanket. And in the beginning, you might just bring your hands to your front thigh. And the idea here is that you're getting a stretch in your hip flexors. So you've got your psoas, and you have your rectus femoris, which is one of the quadricep muscles. And as you lean forward here, you'll feel a stretch here. And as that sort of settles, you might take it a little bit deeper, or eventually you might walk your knee back a little bit more. So you can see I'm getting lower and lower to the ground. And then if you feel like you're ready to support yourself more with your core, you might bring the hands from the thigh up to the sky. And then let's say you want to add a little bit of a back bend here. More of a challenge would be to start to lift the heart up, and eventually you could start to reach back pretty far. Once you built up the strength to take the knee up off the floor, you would do the same pose here, and then eventually you could add the back bend here. There's also a variation where you could reach back. This is pretty intense on the quads, and grab your back foot. You could do it with one hand or both. So if I was teaching this pose in a class, I would start you here, then we would progress to here. If we wanted to work on a deeper sense of stretch, when it was available to you, you might reach back and grab the foot. If you couldn't grab the foot to begin with your hand, you might start with the back. Those students who are a little bit more bendy start to bring their foot in towards their glutes, which really intensifies the stretch in the front of the thigh. And then when you started to have a little bit more balance, you could start to do different variations with your arms. And I'm not sure if I can manage this one right now, but we'll try. So, different ways you can do different poses. And it's lovely to go to a mixed level class, because often you'll see I have students who are starting from ground zero, and I have students who have been practicing for 15 years. And you could quickly look around the room and get a lot of inspiration just by looking at people around you, which is really nice. So I have general contractors in my yoga classes who, in the beginning, could not touch their toes with their hands, just bending over, and now are in full splits. So anything is possible. You would think, I hear this all the time, I can't come to yoga because I'm not flexible. Those are the people who need to come to yoga. right? I don't understand that. Can't do it because I can't do it yet. So the rule of thumb in the Strong Girls yoga class, when, because this happens all the time, somebody will be doing something a little bit more advanced, and then one of the girls might see it and get slightly frustrated, and she'll say, I can't do that. Now all the other girls will say, no, you have to put yet at the end of the sentence. So then you'll hear this chant from like 5 or 6 other girls in the room, you can't do it yet. And then they help each other do it. And then the pride washes over them. And it's just I feel so privileged to be present in that moment, to see that happen. Yeah. Any other questions? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I don't know, is that obvious? Oh, yeah, people love to ask this question, how long is it going to take? Yeah, sure. I wish I could tell you that. There's so many variables. It's like meteorology, you know? I mean, I think we have some idea if there's a nor'easter coming, but then every once in a while they get it totally wrong. And I'm not a very good meteorologist. So a lot of it depends on what you're willing to put in. You know, it's the same with any, and we really are just talking about the physical practice here. So being able to get your foot behind your head, you know, you might spend a couple weeks here. You might be able to start getting your knee up over your shoulder, maybe a few months in. If you're practicing every day, eventually, you know, you'll be able to start here. And then we'll get here. And then the fun thing is that once you're here and you think you're good at this, then there's all kinds of other things that eventually you can try to do, like put the other leg over your head, right? Or you can do that pose and you can come all the way up to stand and have your leg behind your head. So you're never going to get there. There's no place to get to. And it just depends on what you're willing to invest. Now, obviously, we all have different bodies. And so some people have a skeletal system that's not going to allow for their arm to come beyond the acromion process, which is the top of the collarbone here. So somebody who has a limited range of motion might spend their whole life with their arm here if skeletally they can't clear that joint. Other people can get their arm way behind their head. So practice isn't going to change your structure, but certainly you can manipulate a lot of soft tissue with diligence and time. So I wish I could tell you, but I can't. But you can. You'll start to be able to be guided by your own intuition, right? That's the whole idea. I think there was another question over here.
Yeah, I was curious if you had recommendations for books or online resources for developing a home practice?
Yes, great question. There's a fabulous book called, oh my goodness, I'm blanking on his, Yoga Beyond Belief. And it's written by one of my teachers. His name is Ganga White. And it explains the philosophical and the historical context of yoga in layman's terms, which is really nice because there's a lot to cover. And he gives you some very good access points, which make it easy to start doing simple things. And I did want to talk a little bit about that, and I know that we're probably starting to run out of time, but there are different yoga practices for everybody. If I can do it in a chair while getting chemotherapy, you can do it even right here where you're sitting. So having limitations physically should not hold you back. Having bad knees should not hold you back from practicing yoga. And this is yoga, just sitting here and working your arms open, or leaning to the side and breathing deep into your body. So we could do an entire class on chairs. And we do that. I've taught yoga for cancer patients classes when people have been too exhausted from chemotherapy to be on their feet. You can adapt an entire class to do in a chair. And it would be an honor to be able to go into the Salt Marsh Center and do a practice like that, because I think it would be very, very useful. It's always useful to move your body. We're physical people, you know. We live in these physical houses, and we need to, no matter where we are in our lives, what age we are, we need to keep our houses tidy, right? So anyway, I digressed. Yoga Glow, GLO.com, is an online studio. And you can do yoga classes at home with a teacher on the screen. They're filmed very well. They're very well done. And they have a variety of different types of yoga and different teachers that you can download these classes or stream them. I think it's streaming. Anyway, yogaglow.com. So good. Yeah. Okay. Is that it? Yes. I should probably stand up again.
Hello. I'm kind of piggybacking along the last question. For those of us who spend a lot of time sitting at a desk, are there any specific things that you would recommend that we can do either while sitting down or little things in between to kind of stretch and get the body moving after being in that position for a while?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this sounds so simplistic, but just reminding yourself to get up. And sometimes, like if I've been trying to work on this book, I want to write about navigating breast cancer with yoga, and sitting at a desk and writing, I start to forget to do that very thing. And so setting a timer on my phone has been really useful. And so I'll just get up when the timer goes off and stretch, and doing just some simple quad stretches. This doesn't look like impressive, fancy yoga, but this is extremely helpful for opening up the front of the thighs. Or if you're at a desk, I don't trust this all the way here, but you could lean your hands forward and get a nice stretch in your hamstrings this way, and it will also open up your pecs, your shoulders. I think just moving the head and neck and reminding yourself to relax the muscles on the throat is extremely important. So much tension goes into the neck and the shoulders when you're at a computer or you're talking on your phone. Being a massage therapist as well as a yoga teacher, most of the people that come in to see me for massage, their shoulders are up around their ears. It's so common, right? And taking that time to simply breathe and relax your shoulders down your back is going to save you very big massage therapy bills. So yeah, I think carpal tunnel stuff, also really important. Reverse prayer, opening up the wrists, doing little rotations in every joint you can think of. Those would be the things that I check off the list when I'm starting to feel stiff.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And I guess I was curious, as someone who does yoga fairly regularly and enjoys it a lot, but who grew up in the sports culture in the late 90s, early 2000s, where yoga was anything but masculine and, something else. What's the biggest challenge you've found in kind of getting people, especially men, to embrace a Eastern tradition that may be foreign to them, and the best success you've had or the best strategy you've used to get them to explore that?
Yes. So the ironic thing about all of that is that in India, women were not even allowed to practice yoga. Just men. So I'm not totally sure what happened when it came to this country, but that never ceases to amaze me. But it's true that the vast majority of yoga practitioners here are women, and that in the 80s and 90s, it really was, you would rarely see a man in a yoga studio. There's this misconception that yoga is just stretching. Anybody who says that to me, I challenge them to come to my class and I let them know they can come take it for free. And then I ask them at the end of class how their stretching was. And they're usually really exhausted. And I had no idea it was this hard. I didn't know. So what the way I have been able to introduce it to some of the more assertive male folk in this community has been sort of dressing it up as a special offering for a special demographic. So, for example, I did a yoga for triathletes class a few years ago, and I had all of these very, very fit, very tight athletic men show up to take the class, and they loved it. They loved it, but I had to present it in this way, that it was going to be a tool that would what am I trying to say? That it would enhance what they were already doing. That we weren't trying to move them in a different direction, but that I was going to give them something that would serve their athletic goals. And some of them continue to come back just for regular yoga, and I don't even have to put the yoga for triathletes in front of it anymore. So, yeah.
Great. Any more? All right, well, everyone please join me in thanking Caitlin for her time today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all for coming.
Oh, and if you have, if you're curious about cancer and yoga, or yoga for people with cancer, or supporting loved ones with yoga while they're undergoing any sort of long-term illness or challenge, I have a blog. It's just my name, CaitlinMarcoux.com, and you can find, I chronicled my whole journey with cancer on the site, and there's some good resources there. And I'm taking a group to Puerto Rico for the first time. It's my first yoga and stand-up paddle retreat. And so I have some flyers up here in case any of you still don't have your travel plans laid out for this winter. So you can find me and I'll give you that info. Did you have another question? Yeah, so I have some schedules I brought with me here. If you want a paper schedule. Everything else is so easy to find on Google now. You barely even have to throw a web address out anymore. But if you just look up yoga on Nantucket, you will definitely find me, and you will definitely find the yoga room. Thanks. All right, guys, have a beautiful day.